Now that we've made the inverted syrup, we're going to add this to the BeePro and give it a mix, and then it'll be ready to make into the patties. At this time of year there's very little pollen coming in. We want to stimulate the beehives, so we're going to make a pollen substitute, and we're doing that by creating the inverted sugar, which we're now going to add to a dry powder called BeePro, which is a pollen substitute. By including inverted sugar into the mix, it helps the bees take it down into the hive, and this will then stimulate the queen to start laying, ready to build up her nest. We've now thoroughly mixed it in with the invert sugar syrup, and this is now ready for us to make our patties from.
Once it's cooled, and it just needs to set a bit harder so that it can keep its shape on the greaseproof paper.
Now that the BeePro is mixed and is now hardening off nicely, we need to make the patties, and we just need to get a couple of spoonfuls and put it on parchment paper, and then flatten it out so it covers a much wider area. So we turn the parchment paper over and just push down to flatten the patty down. It has to be fairly flat because it needs to go underneath what we call the crown board on the hive, so the bees have easy access to it. And there we are, there's our pate in between. I'm going to remove the lid, just the crown board, and place a pollen patty on the top. At the same time though, we can have a little look and see how the bees have fared over winter. So here we go, looking down into the hive.
These are really quite active, so that indicates that they're a big colony already, or they've survived mostly over winter. I'm just going to give them a bit of a smoke because it's about 11 degrees. Even though the sunshine makes it feel a lot warmer, there's absolutely no wind. So what we need to do first is to score the baking sheet so that the bees can then get the pollen and just scrape and make sure that they've got access to it. We just place it flat over the cluster, and then they can access it whenever they need it. So this is not a pollen substitute for the real stuff. They'll always prefer getting pollen from actual trees, and the pussy willow, I'm sure, has just come out now, so they'll be going for that. But when it's a rainy day or it's early in the morning, they will then have an opportunity to eat this pollen sub. Looking into the hive, pretty much every single frame is still capped of honey. Of course we can only see the tops of the frames. It might be well taken care of underneath and they've eaten their way through, but that's to show that they've still got an awful lot of honey left on this hive. We'll just put the crown board back on. And then, because this always happens after our winters, the lids always get very, very mouldy, so we leave the lids just for half an hour to dry out in the sun, so that then they'll be less moist for when we put the hives together again. Now this hive is absolutely stuffed with honey. I don't know whether you can see that down there. It's just completely capped, and you can see that they're not really in this top box, they're down below, in probably about the second box down with the brood. So we know that this box is pretty much completely surplus of honey.
So what we'll do, when we come to do our first inspection, we will take the top box off with all the honey frames, and then we will store that honey and we will extract it and use it at a later date for them. We can't obviously use it for bottling or jarring because of course it's had treatment to it, but it's fine for the bees. And then when we do some hive splits, or any time where they need feeding in the dearth, which will be about June time, we can again feed them with their own honey, because we don't feed them with sugar water.
And we take the honey off also because at this time of the year they want to expand, and if there's honey that's in the way, it's really going to make it difficult for them to expand, and they're more likely to then swarm early, which you don't want. We want them to swarm pretty much at the beginning of May, when there's so much nectar around that we know that they'll be able to survive and be strong, and that's when we'll be doing our splits. We're going to test, just pull up out a frame to show you how much honey is actually left in this hive. There. They've not even used the bottom of it. So we know that there is plenty of honey that's kept them through the whole of winter in the bottom two boxes. This is the third box up. So we're literally going to take a box of honey off each hive in the next inspection when it gets warm enough. Crazy, absolutely crazy. So this was our ill hive where we did the shook swarm because they had CPBV, and so prolific in bringing the pollen back. Absolutely loaded, mostly with pussy willow pollen. There's a very light yellow pollen coming through, so I'm not quite sure what that is, but the very bright yellow is pussy willow. And if we have a look inside, oh wow, so we just put the pollen, see the bees with pollen on there. Well, this is a hive which has no activity out the front. It had only a few bees last time we came in, and we've just looked at the top, and unfortunately it's not survived. There's still quite a bit of honey here, so they've not starved. If they starved, we would find bees with their heads in the comb looking for food, and it doesn't look like that's the case. Looks like they've died actually on the face of the comb. This could be several things. It could be a queen failure, so therefore there were no young bees to replenish the older bees. Very, very few bees. No seamer, you'd see lots and lots of poo all over the tops of the frames and further down as well. There we go, there's a whole frame of honey, so we know that they've not died from starvation. This colony got the virus as well as the colony on this side. We didn't film it because we just thought it's another colony with the same procedure. However, with this colony, the queen died very early on through the virus, and we actually had to put in another queen, which they did accept. And as soon as she started laying, we could then shake out the bees. But at that point, they were very, very small. So it might have just been that they were too small going into winter. So what we'll do is we will close up the entrance to stop any other bees from robbing it, just in case they have a disease which can be transmissible. And we will take it back next time in the van. What we'll do with all the comb, including the comb with the honey, we won't reuse it, we'll just melt it down. We will clean all the boxes, clean all the frames in the soda, boiling water, and then they'll be nice and clean to fill with new foundation for another hive. Well, we're back at home looking at our two hives here, and we're going to start by looking into this massive hive here. Put on the screen how much honey we took off this hive, and we're going to have a look inside to see how much honey they've got left. Right, so they are definitely well up in the top of this box, and as you can see, complete frames of honey. Let's just take one out. Okay. Right. Not even touched. So all the brood is probably in the third and second box up. This is the fourth box. Remember we said that there were too many for us to squish into 3 boxes. Bet a lot of people would laugh about that, but we didn't want them to be squashed, and they've got a whole box of honey. That's incredible. What a hard-working hive this is, and looking very healthy as well. So this is the other hive, which has some activity on. We've just actually taken 1 box off. This is absolutely chock-a-block of honey, and they're not using it, and there's no bees in there, so we thought we'd just take it off and store it in the garage. This box, the third one up, again chock-a-block with honey, not many bees, but there are still some bees in there, so we didn't want to take that one off for fear of trapping them. So we're thinking that there must be a very small cluster just in the bottom box here. It's a shame. Well, we probably will amalgamate it with this hive over here later on when it's warmer, because they're not strong enough. We've got plenty of strong hives at the farm. We're stressing we haven't taken too much honey off, even though the amount on the screen here is how many frames of honey, how many boxes of honey we took off. It's massive amounts, but this hive is full of honey. It's all honey, but something must have just happened over winter to get their numbers a lot smaller.